Ready?
I'm ready. Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to ask how you're doing this afternoon. We are coming to you here live at allpointstv.com, but the good thing about it is that you can tune us in at your leisure, and we are here 24 hours a day. You can just simply tune us in, and we are on standby. Now, we're not sitting in the studio all that time. What we're doing is taping it so that you can tune it in at your time. But we also come to the studio to do the program every week. And today, we got a double treat today, as a matter of fact, because after this program is over, this is the treat of the week. We have this program followed by Sartorius Black History Corner, and that comes on every second and fourth Monday, and that program comes around at 3:30 and stays around about 4 o'clock. Sometimes they get a little carried away. The program is so good they can't just leave the studio at 3:30. They stay around 3:45, 4 o'clock sometimes. I should say 4 o'clock and 4:15 sometimes. And we'll see what they have in store today. I'll be waiting around to greet them as they come in the studio, and then I'm going to rush off to the homeland and watch them live as I always do at my own abode as I head out and watch it, close the door. Don't want to be interrupted. Get the dogs out of the way. Let them go outside and play. I don't want any interruptions when that program comes on. And don't you let anybody interrupt you as we're doing this program. We'll come and take you out of our will. All of you are in my prayers every day. I did before coming to the studio today, I did I try to do my post before I leave for the studio, and I have my post up, and I'm continuing this dialogue. I don't want to just die down because everybody in the Eric Holder administration has gotten very quiet since they have come behind the grand jury in Ferguson, Missouri, and they are now like a church mouse. In there, going to the bathroom on cotton. You can't hear anything from these people. All we hear is crickets. But you probably have heard that they do not intend to carry forward, after all this verbosity out here, they do not plan to carry forward any future proceedings against Darren Wilson, which already had predicted that would be the case, having looked at all the evidence in the case. And I knew that it was pretty much over when 5 black witnesses came to the forum and had the courage to say that their eyewitness account would not, in fact, disagree in any major way with that of Darren Wilson. And I knew once they went there behind the communities back in Ferguson and then took it upon themselves to tell the truth and got away from this narrative that the press was trying to push, that we were dealing with a Joan Giant. A Joan Giant was in the store doing a strong arm robbery 13 minutes before he went out there and confronted Darren Wilson and wrestled with him for his gun. And they're going to make him a Joan Giant. New York Times and Washington Post and all these other narratives in the media, they're trying to get us to believe that they don't have a narrative, trying to push us up against each other.
You know what I found so disconcerting is all the people out there demanding a guilty verdict on against the officer. And I have issues with cops, so I'm not going to lie about that. I would put that right out there. But every case is supposed to be judged on its own merits. As soon as it's a white cop or a white against the black, that should be automatically just thrown aside, and the whites assumed guilty. That goes. And the black leaders are so disingenuous to actually go around advocating that when it was the fact that people were sympathetic or actually did want to follow our own Constitution, our own way of life, our own Bill of Rights, when they were the voice that was not being heard. But now they want to shut out anybody else. It always proves that people who were once no longer weren't in power, once they gain power, they're more abusive than the people who always had power.
Yeah, that's a point made by Walter Williams, by the way, and you are definitely correct in that. Those you would think that those would be sensitive to that kind of stricture, having faced it themselves, but when they get power, as you just said, John, what happens there is that you don't see any sensitivity to the burden they're placing upon others after coming from underneath those burdens themselves. You would think otherwise, but the history is very clear about that. we have a reason why that goes on, by the way, in terms of these civil rights leaders, and put that word leaders in all kinds of quotes, is because there is actually no civil rights work to be done. And I've said this a number of times in this program, and I've also written about it on my Facebook posts. There is no more civil rights work to be done. And I make that claim because I have read, I read really what Dr. King was saying in 1957. We don't talk too much about the first march in Washington that King was involved in. He was involved in a second march in Washington in 1963. But what about the first one that he went to Washington in 1957, 6 years earlier? And on the 17th of May of 1957, what Dr. King did was deliver another speech. This was not I Have a Dream. This was Give Us the Ballot. And I was carrying around if just in case I get around to talking about that, I was bring a copy, as I did last week, a copy of that speech, so that I can remind myself of the specific words that King actually gave that day when he was talking about give us the ballot. And he said in that speech that if blacks got the ballot, they would not need the federal government to intervene in their behalf, because he was looking at it from a Southern standpoint. The Southern standpoint was that they were kept in abeyance from exercising their full constitutional rights because of the impediment that's put in place by the politicians in the South. King wanted to remove that. He knew the vote would in fact get him out of the way, because if there was the right to vote, I'm talking about the enforcement of the right to vote, because you could not deny the right to vote based upon the 15th Amendment, based upon the claims of a person's race, national origin, previous condition of servitude. And so the right to vote was there, but it was not enforced. And so you have to kind of remind some people by passing new legislation that does the same thing the old legislation did, but people have to have reminders. So you pass laws in their time period so they can see it. But King understood it, and he knew what he was dealing with. And what he was dealing with was these politicians that were keeping one part of the constituency in place, but not letting them go to the polls and exercise the right to vote, and then crediting the other group and giving them some license that they would not have if there was egalitarianism that would reign supreme. So he understood what the problem was, and the problem was a political problem. Well, he called for that in 1957, and 8 years later, in 1965, the Democrats can now have a civil rights bill that they can take credit for. Now, they didn't pass the bill in the House and Senate. That was passed by Republicans, who voted in larger percentages to pass this bill, as they had done all the other civil rights bills prior to that, including the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments. And all of that was Republicans. And even the civil rights bill in 1964 and the one in 1965 had more Republicans voting for it than it did Democrats, but there's a Democratic president this time. Unlike the bill that had been passed in 1957, which was an answer to the call that King had made in May of that year, give us the ballot. Well, the Republican Party passed the Civil Rights Bill in 57, and it was signed into law in September of that year. We haven't even heard about that bill, but they signed it into law in 1957 after King had called for it. Let's see, he called for it in May. Let's see, May, June, July, August. They were 4 months later they passed it. And when they passed that bill, it was pretty much a voting rights bill that was passed. Watered down, I might say, by Lyndon Johnson. And I have the documents right here in case you don't, unless you don't, if you don't believe me. Because I don't talk unless I talk from documents. That's my training. And so I have it right here called LBJ. I got it off the internet, where I go and get a lot of my data now. You don't have to go to the library as much as I used to when I didn't have the access. But now that you have access, you can get it right at your desk. It's at your fingertips. And there's one article on the internet called LBJ versus the Civil Rights Act of 1957. And there's another article that I copied that I brought off the net prior to this article. It's the one about the Civil Rights Bill that would have been passed in 56, but it was defeated by the Democrats when filibustered it. And I think that That is the bill. Either that one or the one in 57 was one that Strom Thurmond, who at that time was a Democrat, had the longest filibuster that was ever launched on the floor of the Senate. You know, it takes closure. It takes a 3/5 vote, 60 votes in the Senate to bring about closure, and they could not bring it about. But by the time that they got the bill reconstituted in 57, it was so watered down that it didn't actually have any kind of teeth in it. But now Johnson's president, having taken over from John F. Kennedy in 1963, after Kennedy had been assassinated, unfortunately, in Dallas on the 22nd of November 1963. And now that he's president, the Democrats, who didn't pass the bill, it was passed by Republicans, but this time a Democratic president can be seen visibly signing into law. And so Johnson's changed his mind and is now standing on the bill that he never would have supported if the Republicans had still been in power, because how would the blacks vote if they got the right to vote? And as a Republican president, we can all see signing it into law. I mean, it's even it's even quietly kept that the King memorial that we have every year, you know, the third Monday of each month, each January of every year, we have the celebration of Dr. King's birthday. We know he was born January the 15th, 1929, but what they do is they celebrate the third Monday in January, and sometimes that will fall on the 15th, because if the month starts the 1st, you have the 1st, the 8th, and the 15th. Sometimes it doesn't fall on that date. Whatever that Monday is, that third Monday, it falls on that particular date. This time it was the 19th of this month. But nobody even talks about the fact that when it was signed into law in 1983, it was signed into law by Ronald Reagan, so we had to dismiss that because he's a Republican. We can't let black folks see that, or they'll begin to question why they voted 90 and 95% for Democrats every time they have a national election. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is that King called for give us the ballot, and that was given again for the umpteenth time in 1957, but it didn't have any effect because we have to tell the Democrats to stop doing what they're doing, because they're the ones that's actually keeping blacks from the franchise in the South. But when Johnson signs it 8 years later into law, pretty much the same bill he had been against in 1956 and 1957. 56 they killed it, in 57 they watered it down. Then the Democrats can take a bow for it, and they even deserve that. It's like
Did you see on the History Channel? Did you see when the guy whose name he's a singer, and he actually does a show on the History Channel about things you didn't know about America or something like that. And he talks. They did a whole thing about Lyndon Johnson. Oh my God! It made him sound like he was a saintly hero, that always was a champion for the rights of blacks.
Yeah.
Which is like totally against what I've ever read about him beforehand. I mean, the more honest account of him. Yeah, Henry Rollins is the guy's name. Henry Rollins does a show called he used to be with the kind of a punk band, edge band called I think Black Flag or Misfits. I forget which one. Mm-hmm. But he's a good guy. He was born and raised in D.C. Mm-hmm. So he's got a lot of a fondness for history because of that. And I'm like, he was talking to these people about how he championed the rights for the blacks and stuff from early on. I went, are you out of your mind? This guy was. He was a dirtbag.
Yeah, he's a politician, and so I would not transcribe anything of your definition of what they are, but let's say he's a politician first, and the rest of that can be imported because he is a politician. All this stuff about people acting in ways that are humane, and they're philanthropists, and they're doing the right thing because of the goodness of their heart. When do we met those politicians? I mean, this is just like, Plato talking about these philosopher kings. What have we seen? I mean, in the Republic, you talk about the philosopher kings. I was reading that in undergraduate school in Mrs. Russell's class in political science. I'm reading Plato's Republic, and I'm looking at where are these philosopher kings supposed to come up and do the right thing because they have this heart transplant, and they come out for the goodness of the people, and they're going to do that which is in the interest of the people because of the goodness of their heart. When have we seen that? The politicians don't act that way. They do that which is politically expedient. And as Thomas Sowell says a lot of times in his writings, is that first, second, and third in their list is getting elected, getting reelected, and getting reelected again. And then when they turned them down after 3 elections, like they did down there where Mary Landrieu was in Louisiana, when they turned their back on them, all of a sudden they want to talk about how the people are turning on them because they're against women and they're against blacks. But she's elected, although she's elected 3 terms, and all of a sudden people don't like her because she's a female. But politicians are doing that which is in their own self-interest. And if we expect them to do anything other than that, we're wasting our time. And I have a whole narrative I'm going to be writing on that when we get close to these elections next year, because there are a whole lot of folks throwing their hands in the ring. And they're just politicians like all the rest of them. And Johnson was a politician. And he acted politically. Now, when John was making that point, I pulled out another document here that I wrote. I wrote on Facebook an article, a narrative that I wrote called "SELMA, the Movie and the Mockery." And I have in that narrative that one of the things about the film director of Selma that took a hit on was Ava DuVernay, who is the producer of that film. And there was a controversy about her treatment of Johnson in the film. And the controversy was over those who are Johnson's biographers that did not feel that that she gave Johnson too much credit, didn't give Johnson enough credit. Well, I was watching the movie, and when I went to see it, some of the one of the sororities in the city purchased the 2 theaters out there in one of the suburban theaters, and I paid for a ticket. I should have paid for it at the other theater where I could have saved some money, but I wanted to go and support them, and I went and paid $15 to get a little small bag of popcorn. I'm still mad about that. But I went to see the movie with this group, and they were having a discussion after the movie was over. And I told them after the movie was over, I was trying not to say anything, but when they recognized I was in the audience, I knew they were going to call on me at some point. Even if I didn't raise my hand, I'm going to still be called on. And they called on me and said, "Mr. Wallace, I see you over there hiding out." So then they gave me the microphone. I had to get up there and say that I kept watching for the Johnson piece, since I had been reading all these polemics about the film does not give Johnson his due. He is not being fairly treated. And we got to simply call this movie in because, what is this, The Butler? And which is where they mistreated Reagan. And so here you now mistreating Johnson. Now, the Reagan piece, there was abuse because Reagan was the one that made him maitre d'. Gaines, Cecil Gaines, the real Cecil Gaines, not that part they imported in there where they had to say you may not have noticed this, but in the credits they had to say based upon the story of, but not the story of the guy, because they had a lot of things in there about the Klan, they're burning the property down, you're picking cotton out there and all of that. All that's added to the film. That's not in the guy's biography. So they really did a job on Reagan, because Reagan was the one that made him maitre d'. But they couldn't have that go through. Then what's that going to do to the voters that they got over here, herded into the Democratic Party, just like they did in terms of the narrative of 57 being, council, and then 65 we can give Johnson the credit and got him herded over there in the Democratic Party. It'd do the same thing if he gave the true history of what happened with Cecil Gaines, the guy they talked about, they did the movie on called The Butler. Can't have that get out. Well, in the case of the Johnson piece, I kept watching. I kept waiting. I'm waiting for the narrative to get around to the Johnson piece and his role in it. And they got Johnson there where he's going to break with the Southern Democrats. Now, don't forget, he was a Southern Democrat from Texas. And and they got him concerned after all these years. Now, don't forget, he was in the Congress for the first time in 1944. They called him Landslide Johnson, because he stole that election was stolen from him. And they have a lot of jokes around that. You probably heard some of them where they had Jose was crying because his dad didn't come to see him. And they told Jose, your dad's been dead all these years. And Jose said, no, he didn't, because he voted for Johnson last night and didn't come out to see me. So Landslide Johnson, it goes back to 1944, 46.
The Democratic Party truly is the party of miracles. All the dead people vote for him. Did you see the meme that was going around on Facebook a few months ago, or before the elections? It says, "My grandmother was a lifelong Republican until after she died. Then she started voting for Democrats."
Yeah, right.
I think it's a common knowledge. You can't deny it. They cannot deny this.
Johnson, let me tell you, they did it in Chicago. In the Mail Daily, the last of the big boss machines. You know he's a Democrat, right? Like Boss Tweed. What they would do in Chicago is that they would have they had these people on the plantation, and the Democratic Party gonna make sure that if you don't vote for the Democratic Party machine, they're gonna find you out. And what they did was put a pencil inside of the voting booth, and they had the string attached to it. They hang down below the place where the voting booth is. Now, if you were going to, and they just had Democrats on the ticket, and every time you pick that pencil up, they know you were voting for a non-Democrat. Because they can see that pencil that string was below the place where the booth would end, where it blocks your view. Well, every time that pencil was picked up, they know you're writing in a candidate that's not on that Democratic Party ballot. And that's how they kept you in line in Chicago. And I might add on the QT and running, that when Dr. King went to Chicago, because we got the voting rights bill passed in 1965, when he went to Chicago in 1966, they found that out. They went up there thinking they're going to take the civil rights movement that's basically a southern-based movement, going to carry it into the north. They went to Chicago, and they ran into those blacks that's up there maintaining the status quo in Chicago. And King would write about that and say that they had never seen anything like they saw then. They pushed it back into the South for the next 2 years. And King got to go and now find some work to do, because the civil rights movement is over in 65. And I've said that, and I have not yet been challenged by any of these persons that will say otherwise. They're not going to say anything otherwise, because that's the fact. The civil rights movement ended in 65. And King was even floundering around looking for some work to do for the last 3 years. And that's why he's in Memphis. And I'm saying this, and nobody else has said it, but I want these so-called experts to tell me why is King in Memphis dealing with a garbage strike in 1968 and have them around with these signs saying, "I'm a man." I don't think anybody ever said they were not a man. What they're saying, they're not going to pay you. In other words, if you want more money than what they're paying, you get a higher level skill level. The marketplace does not pay at that point in time for garbage workers. I'm not saying garbage workers should not get their due. That's a bargaining issue, though. And King has injected himself into a bargaining issue between the employer and the employee, because there's no civil rights work to be done at that point. King has already finished his project 3 years before he was killed. And he's floundering around in Memphis trying to find some other work they can actually do, because what he called for in 1957, they have not done that. They did it in 57. But in 8 years later, in 65, the Democrats can now get get black people off that plantation and place them on another plantation. And really, let me make this point. Nobody's made this point either before. Let me make this point. What's changed in terms of the Democratic Party relationship to blacks in this country? What's changed is that in the past, the Democratic Party, the party of the Klan, what they did was, in fact, stop blacks from going to the polls and had this paramilitary organization called the Ku Klux Klan that was founded in 1865. It was founded as a military apparatus in response to the Republican Party, which had these military zones, 5 of them, carved up in the South. And so what they did, the Klan basically, made up some of the persons that were former Confederates, like Jesse James, for example, before he rode off into the West and started shooting out there. Well, he started in right after the Civil War, and what you had there was the Klan was set up to deal with the fact that they had these 5 military districts carved up in the South, and the Ku Klux Klan was going to organize against the Republican Party that's militarily, situated in the South, maintaining quote-unquote order for what purpose? So the Republican Party would take power in the South. And they certainly were not going to get it from the Democrats whose soldiers they had fought, and there were people that were now coming up and their parents had died in that war, and they're not going to credit the Republican Party. There's no way you have an entree into the South through the Democratic Party. So the only way they're going to get into power in the South is through the blacks. And that's why they're doing what they're doing. They're doing it politically also.
I've heard some blacks now just try to turn that around. The Republicans in the South, they say, when they gave power, that was just because they wanted to find get going more control in more areas. And that could have been the case. I mean, I'm not going to take that away from politicians. That's what they're motivated by, is money and power and
Yes.
money. But if you just look overall, the Democratic Party's got far more to be ashamed of than Republicans have.
Yeah, I mean, even in acting politically, you can act correctly. I mean, just because you're acting politically does not mean that you're not doing things correctly. I mean, it's important to, in fact, empower people who are no longer on the plantations. The 13th Amendment having gotten rid of all the slavery in the country. So it is important then not to stop there and make sure they have some basis to protect themselves and defend themselves politically.
Ulysses S. Grant, he was, after he had been the general, became the president of the United States within the 1870s, I think, after the Civil War. He was his administration is known to be corrupt, and that's where lobbyists comes from. It's like he used to walk to this lobby of this hotel not too far from the White House, and he'd sit there and smoke a cigar, drink whiskey, and people would come to approach him. They talk to him about stuff they want to talk to him about, and it was in the lobby, so that's where they get the term lobbyist from. But even with his corruption, he was one of the first presidents of the National Rifle Association, which actually advocated keeping the blacks in the South armed to prevent being murdered in mass by the KKK and other organizations out there, and the repressive Democratic-controlled political machines down there. So I mean, he's not even given credit. I mean, it's just like Richard Nixon. You and I differ. I think he ordered the break-in on Watergate. Okay, having said that, even if he had, it was a political thing. It's on him. He felt ashamed enough. He resigned. The people who were responsible for the actual break-in went to prison. That was it. There was nothing. How much did that cost the United States citizen on the average? Were you fearing for your life, your loss of communities? No, it was political parties spying on other political parties. Shame, slap your hand, say bad boy. That's it. Okay? At least you can't shame a Democrat. You cannot shame a Democrat. You can walk in catching them, messing with your wife, and you take a picture of it, and they'll turn around and attack you, making you weren't taking care of her or something. They have no shame. That's how they keep their advantage. They have no shame because they have no moral basis to appeal to. It's all about power. This is my observation.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like, and I'm sure some Republicans that I'm not aware of could be like that too. But if you look at the national level, Democrats have no shame. Bill Clinton, they tried to turn Ken Starr into an evil man. He was doing his job. That was his job. Clinton suborned perjury. Okay, he could have just confessed that he had an affair with Monica Lewinsky, and that'd be the end of it.
Yeah.
But him getting his subordinates to lie for him, that's was corruption of the government. We should be concerned about that.
Yeah, well, the thing that we have to also, and you're right. There are some things we do disagree on. I would argue some of those points differently. But the main thing is that politicians are there is some good that comes along behind the trail of politicians. I'm not saying that you can't say that there is no sub bonum, bottom line where nothing is served in terms of the people's interests. I mean, they have to even serve some of the interests of people in order to get people to vote for them. So there are some things they got to do, and even if they do it, pull to the inevitable end, gnashing their teeth and kicking all along the way. So there's some outlets and corridors to good intent, even though the intent starts out and ends up being political. I mean, there's some things that are going to happen that will have some positive effects, but let's understand what the ultimate intent is. The intent is to accumulate, power. That's what politics is. This idea is the art of compromise. We can, debate that till the cows come home. But really, politics is the pursuit of power, and both parties are in that pursuit. Some have to do it through this constituency base, and some in another constituency base, and they have to then, play both sides of the fence, but they're both in the same game. And that's why I'm not. See, people think I'm a Republican. I'm not a Republican. I'm a conservative, and I realize now that I was always a conservative. I kept I kept trying to figure out why am I arguing with all these people all the time that's over here in this part of the community. And why am I was I and well I now know I didn't understand my own identity. I guess it was at that time, but both parties act that way. But sometimes you get a benefit over here and you get a benefit over there, and that's why I have to be independent of both parties, because I understand they're working in their own interests and not in our interests. I mean, they're not working in the interest of the American people. They're working in their interests, and the political elite are going to continue to work in their interests, and sometimes that will have a benefit. But that is that's really kind of like a non-intended consequence. I mean, it's not that it's not the priority is what I'm saying, and it's impossible for them to serve all of the interests without serving some of the interests of the people that vote for them. I mean, that's what the Bible doesn't understand. I heard this joker. He doesn't know anything, but I heard this man say, "When did greed become a good thing?" Well, when I hear somebody say that, I have to say this you can't be more ignorant than that. Greed is people's motivation for doing anything. Why do they do things? Why do they do anything? They do it because they want to advantage themselves. So greed is a good thing. But you see, you can be greedy in a room all you want to. If you don't make a product or sell something to somebody and they want to pay you for that, so as to get your money, because they can't take it because only the state can initiate force. You can initiate force legally. The only entity in this society that has monopoly on the legal right to initiate force, even if they're initiating it inappropriately and sometimes illegally, the statutes protect them initiating force. They can go and kick the wrong doors in at a house, and then rather than saying we're going to fix the house, then we kick the doors in. It's oops, we got the wrong address. Let's go and kick the next door in, the one we should have gone the first time. Well, they have the right to initiate force in the government does, and sometimes it does it. Many times it does it illegitimately. But you can't do it. So how do you get? So you're greedy. How do you get your money? Well, you get it not through the use of weaponry. You do it because you're able to produce something that somebody's willing to pay you for, and your greed causes you to make the product because you want to advantage yourself, and your greed makes you want to find out what will customers pay for. And basically, what people do, by the way, when they invent stuff, and I did that. I saw that when I just left before I came to the studio. I turned off my television set because I was watching the news to find out what have they done. What have they done now up there in Washington? I was watching one of the news programs before coming to the studio, and that little clicker that I had kept me from walking up to the television set. I get, you have the box and you get the TV set. It means you got to punch two buttons, and why do I want to do that when I can just simply make sure I'm standing in a certain place and then hit one button and both things go off at the same time. Somebody invented that. And why did they invent it? Because we're too lazy to walk to the television set. We don't want to get up and change the channel every time. That's too much work. And so somebody invented that little clicker and allow you to sit at your chair and change the channel. And they got 1,000 channels right now. And you just go up there. You're not going to walk up there every time and change the channel, go up there and see if you like that program, go back up. Anybody won't do that. So somebody invented something that allow you to act upon your laziness. And all inventions are based on our laziness. That's what they take advantage of. We don't like to walk, so somebody invented a wagon. And it was pulled by horses. And then when they built a car, they want to talk about how many horsepower was in the car. Because they couldn't forget that the first transportation was on donkey's back. And then because the donkey can't run that fast, and he's going to go a mile, a year, you got to have horses. And then the horses don't like to do any work, so we got to find a way to get rid of the horse. So now, we don't want to walk, so the horse don't want us on his back. I saw those cowboy pictures about that. And he's jumping up and down there to get you off his back, and if you try to ride a bull, you got a problem there too. So you got a car, and That's because we're lazy. You know, I get in my car to ride next door. And don't tell me to walk down to the store, down the street where the store is. That's too much work. Can't have that. But that's what they're doing. They are greed. Greed is the factor that is in back of all of these inventions. People are in a room trying to think of something that has not been thought of, so that they can justify, getting wealth that they don't have and will not have unless they can invent something that allows them to get an advantage they wouldn't have if they had not done that. And greed causes them to do that. Otherwise, there's no motive behind. They're certainly not trying to advantage me. I fixed some toast this morning with my coffee, and the person that made that bread doesn't know me, doesn't care whether all he cares about is whether I bought the loaf of bread, took it home, use it, and needs some more bread next week. And that's what he cares about. Greed makes him do that. So I hear a president telling me that he doesn't know when greed became a good thing. I want to know when it became a bad thing. And ever since I read Rand's book called The Virtue of Selfishness, I know exactly what role greed plays.
Well, if the greed's not a good thing, then why the hell is he doing $14 million in his account when he started out with nothing?
Yeah, how much charity?
Yeah, and what's he going to do with it? Oh, give it to his kids, so they can be a privileged class in the future.
Yes.
They'll have a better education than most people will, and they have more access. We should charge them a tax for their connections they can get from being in the position to serve us, quote unquote.
I'd like to see them, John, to give back, since they don't deserve any of it, give back the money that they get paid. The members of Congress get paid $174,000 a year. The president gets $400,000 plus he has an expense account. And so when you look at how much cost is involved in, and then look how much it costs when they travel, that's enough. How many millions of dollars is that in terms of the cost to the taxpayers? I would like to see them, since they're into charity, that's being charitable with my money. Talking to Joe the plumber about the charity that he was going to impose upon us by taking our money by gunpoint and making us charitable against our will. And I like to see these politicians be so charitable that they don't get paid unless they fix some of these problems they're causing. And that would be very few paychecks up there. You know what? We could probably pay off the national debt if we pay these politicians what they're worth. And that's the ones that's in office and the ones that have left office and are getting paid because, you know what they do? They make sure that when they serve a few years, and we got to work 30 years to get out of retirement. They work a few years, as long as they're up there, breathing, they get a pension once they leave. Now, they get paid pretty good while they're there, and they get paid the rest of their lives once they leave. And I don't know how many years it is, but I can tell you this, it ain't 30. And if they just would get paid for the job they did, we would be paying these guys. And they talk about greed. How many times have they given back anything that they have not earned? They keep raising their salary. And in fact, in the Constitution, in the 27th Amendment in the Constitution, it says it has to prohibit these guys from getting paid during the term in which the in terms of in which the pay would be increased. It says that no increase that they vote in will go into effect until after the next election. Now, why do they do that? Because the purse is controlled by the House, and the way you keep these persons under wraps is to make them, if they're going to vote for a tax, it doesn't kick in until they go before the voters, and the voters can then punish them for having the nerve to say you want to increase your salary. For what? What are you? You're charitable, right? So, give me a break. Give me a break. These people are not even worth the money they're getting paid. They haven't earned. There's nobody up there earning any of the money. None of them. There are 535 members in the Congress, and none of them are earning their keep. This is all charity. We giving these guys charity because that's all charity. They're not earning that income. These people are up there doing what Von Mises says in his pamphlet called The Anti-Capitalist Mentality. That's one of the best reads, by the way. But Von Mises, who they founded, he was such a smart man, they founded these Mises Institutes that they have as an economic school where you can understand something that John Maynard Keynes didn't understand, and what that guy over there in New York, what is that guy? That guy's name is easy to forget. Krugman. Paul Krugman. They gave him a Nobel Peace Prize. I'm just trying to figure out what was that about. Somebody gave him charity and gave him some award that he hasn't earned yet. I don't think the man even understands economics with the stuff that he's writing. Even some of the economists have come out and said, what school was that this guy finished? But let's be honest, these guys are not earning their keep. And it's charity on our part to pay them. Look at all the problems they're creating. And von Mises says in that pamphlet that the reason we were able to get off the blocks and create the greatest country in the history of the world that was creating more wealth in the world was because the politicians got involved in the economy here last. You look at where the politicians got out of the blocks at the very beginning and inception of these countries getting the independence in Africa, and all you see there is poverty, and that's the reason why you see poverty there. You can claim colonialism all you want to. The reason why Africa is poor is because when the colonialists left, the power fell in the hands of the militarists there. And that's what Amilcar Cabral is talking about when he says that the people got confused when they took up the arms to get the Europeans off the land. They said they got confused thinking they were militarists rather than militants. And when they achieved the objective, which is ending colonialism, what happened was the military took over. And they kept on bouncing out of power, and more military persons coming in. And politicians, don't forget, politicians have guns. And that's why Africa is not undeveloped right now. And that's why these persons in African studies departments do not talk about Africa anymore. Because the thrill is gone. That's B.B. King. The thrill is gone. Yeah, I can't sing. I don't have Lucille. You have to have a guitar to sing that song. But the reason why that happened is because the politicians and what you're seeing in America right now is that you see what is happening in America. Why? Because the thing that Ayn Rand talked about back in the 50s, when she put out her classic Atlas Shrugged in 1957, the same year, by the way, the Civil Rights Bill that was passed in that year. So something was going on that year we should have paid more attention to. We didn't in terms of 65, we did in terms of Ayn Rand's book. But she said in 1957, she saw this creeping monstrosity coming into existence in this country, talking about altruism and talking about this creeping takeover of the economy. And it's pretty much it's pretty much in place right now where the federal government controls the economy. And look at the result of that in terms of what we are seeing. What are we seeing? We're seeing a third world country. John, did you see where they had Venezuela last week? Did you see that article about Venezuela?
Yeah, it's like horrible there.
You see the shelves there?
Yeah.
They don't want you taking pictures of the shelves.
Yeah, see, and that's Obama's hero. The guy before him, what's his name? Escaping
Chavez.
Chavez, that's his hero. And that's also the hero of most of the Democratic Party, Sean Penn, and all
don't forget Castro.
And Castro. and it's like, you people are saying, you know that they're writing you off as you're not one of their elite. They're writing you off that you think by pushing for their agenda, your interest is going to be served. You guys are, where's that ever happened in the planet where this has been instituted?
It hasn't happened, and it's amazing. See, the problem, I said this on a post, one of my friends posted. He posts all his articles on my wall, I guess because he thinks that if it's not on my wall, I won't read it. But he posts everything he posts on Facebook on my wall. And he posted this one on Maduro. Maduro is the one that succeeded after Hugo Chavez. And he was showing these shelves are now empty. It's like Zimbabwe, after Mugabe took over in 1980. After E.R. Smith had been vacated what was called Southern Rhodesia. Now it's called Zimbabwe. There was Southern Rhodesia, Northern Rhodesia. Southern Rhodesia became Zimbabwe, and Northern Rhodesia became Zambia. And Mugabe took over in 1980. He run that country to the ground with socialism. And I said to my friend's wall that it's not socialism the problem. I mean, because socialism, we've seen that it doesn't solve the problem. It just sits there. I mean, the fact it has never worked, doesn't work now, everywhere has been tried, it's been a failure. So socialism is not the problem. The problem is the people that keep on trying to apply a solution to a problem is never solved. It never will solve the problem. So I don't blame socialism. I blame Maduro, before him, Chavez. I blame Fidel Castro and then his brother. I blame Kim Jong-un over there in North Korea and all the rest of these people that cannot learn because they got a learning curve of zero. I blame Obama because Obama's doing the same thing here. Socializing the economy. Social is not the problem. The problem are these people that have a learning curve of zero. They will not learn the lesson, but that's the only lesson that's been taught by it. There is no other lesson that's been taught by the application of socialism, ever. Even in this country, you go back and see it. There's a book out, a book written by Thomas De Lorenzo. It's called How Capitalism Saved America. Now, you might not get through that whole book. So let me see if I can just tell you what part of to read, and you'll have, read the whole book. But there is a part of it that will get you into understanding the rest of it if you read the first couple of chapters, and don't forget the introduction. Because that's where it says that when the colonists first came over here, the reason why we celebrate Thanksgiving is because when they first came over here, they tried socialism. It wasn't called that. I mean, Karl Marx hadn't written his treatise at this point called the Communist Manifesto until 1848. And we're talking here about them arriving at Jamestown and the Pilgrims arriving in Jamestown in 1620, 1 year after Lerone Bennett's book talks about the arrival of blacks at Jamestown in 1619, 1 year before Mayflower. In this book called Before the Mayflower, Jamestown was founded, by the way, in 1607. But the Pilgrims arrived in 1620. The first blacks came in Jamestown in 1619, 20 blacks off of that Dutch ship. And that's what Bennett's talking about in his book. But they tried socialism. What they're going to do there, since Karl Marx will write about it later on, he's a Johnny come lately, by the way. And he came and said, from each according to what he can do, and then to each according to his needs. That's pretty much the concept of Karl Marx. You know, give a person give the people what they want. You know, what's the name of that song? Give people what they want, and everything else will fall in place. Just simply satisfy their needs, and they will, in fact, do the rest of it. So, from each according to what he can do, to each according to his needs, and all of a sudden, everybody got a bone in their leg. Nobody can do anything. Everybody's handicapped, and so they tried that concept. Now, he had not written his book at this point. He won't write that until 1848. But they tried the idea. And they decided what we're going to do here is that we're going to put all the produce in the warehouse. And we're going to let everybody here in Jamestown, we're going to let them go to the warehouse, get what they need, and then everything be fine. And then, we're going to have them, well fed, and they go out there and plant so we have food for the next year. Next year they found there was no food in the cupboard. Nobody had done anything. And what Thomas De Lorenzo is talking about in that book called How Capitalism Saved America, not socialism. He didn't write about how socialism saved America. No, socialism is what they tried. And that's what was killing America. So he wrote a book called How Capitalism Saved America. And what they found out is that, look, we're starving. And thank goodness for those Native Americans who had to come over there and rescue those poor souls, gave them turkey cranberry sauce. Well, that wasn't really the meal. I mean, we can make that up. But, helped them out because they didn't have anything after that first winter because they were out there starving. And Native Americans come in and show them how to do certain things or even get through that winter because they're not really prepared for the hardship. And so Thanksgiving is really about that. But they hide the fact that what we're really talking about here is that this socialist experiment, and we're still trying, even under this administration, we'll keep trying this stuff. And at some point in time, you've got to stop blaming it on the ism. I mean, socialism. We got to stop blaming it on socialism and blame it on these politicians who can't learn anything because what? They got a learning curve of zero. They don't know anything. And that's what I was saying. We pay them. The fact they're getting a salary shows they're not charitable, and they're charitable with our money. But what about the money they're getting? And we don't. In fact, the Democrats. We got a statistic on this one. The Democrats are the least charitable persons in the country. You can go read the statistics on it. They don't give any money. These people don't even go to church and give any money in church. So this idea that, and they always talk about charity. I'll tell you another thing. Okay, I went to a meeting at the university. That's why I'm dressed up today. I normally stop dressing up on Mondays, but I had to go. I went to a meeting. I went there. Okay, so I went to a meeting at the. So down there, all they talk about in all these meetings at these universities, diversity. Okay, fine. How many Republicans do you have in any political science department anywhere in the United States? Can you answer that question for me? What about the question of how many Republicans do you have in the, let me make this one real easy, the Black Studies Department? How many Republicans in there? And that one person that wrote Julius Lester, who was back there with the Afro back in the 1960s, but he kind of went off into he became a person that called he was now a black Jew, and he had changed his mind about some of the things he wrote about in the 1960s because he lived longer, so some of the ideas were changed. Now everybody back there with Malcolm X because Malcolm X died in 65, February 21st, 65, and so the idea is that Malcolm said this, and so they act like they can't change anything because Malcolm was 65 and they lived 40 some odd years beyond that point. And they're going to act like they can only say what Malcolm said. Malcolm died, 50 years ago. So this man continues to grow and learn and read. And he changed his mind about some things because everybody's not stuck on stupid. I mean, you have to continue to grow. And even Malcolm was doing that because he was saying one thing one day and he was saying something different and all of that. And you couldn't let him speak in the Selma film. That's why you had to show him coming into Selma, but you didn't let him say anything on the screen. You showed him come in there, but you didn't let him say anything. I saw you. I saw you. I caught you on that part. But they go ahead. But Julius Lester changed his mind, and he's now in the Black Studies Department. I forget what university it was. And now the Black Studies instructors are telling the dean that you better get this guy out of here before we kill him because he was bringing some diversity. But look what they were doing. Diversity is what you're supposed to do. We want to have multiculturalism. Try it. Try it where the liberals are. They're the most undiverse, the least multicultural group in the universe, but they're always talking about it, and they're not multicultural in no sense of the word. You better be in lockstep. And the reason why I'm a pariah and going to continue to be a pariah is not supposed to indicate today because I went into a whole different zone there because I said in that post, and I dared them to get on that post about this one either. I said that black liberals are insane. Now, I would say all of them, but I have not met all of them. My landscape cannot be that widespread. But the ones I met, all of them insane that I met. And until they recognize that insanity that they're in, you can't solve this problem. And so they're not going to like that. But I tell you what they better not do, and they will not do. They won't say anything publicly about it. And I'm inviting them that... Yeah, on that post today, I was dealing with that issue of your gentle giant, Michael Brown, and I said on that post, Michael Brown was a thug, and all the black people, all the black liberals know he's a thug, but because of the white racist liberals, who are blind people's worst nightmare, they are trying to act as if that's not true, and it is true. That these people the liberals have a narrative they're running, and none of that stuff is true, none of it. And so I wrote on my Facebook wall today, and I dare any of them to get on that post and say anything about it. They're not going to do it because they don't have any answers to what I write. And I give Ava DuVernay a lot of credit because she did a good job with SELMA. Excellent job. And she should not have given Johnson any more credit than she did. She gave him too much credit, as a matter of fact, because Johnson was an impediment in the civil rights movement. And he only did what he had to do based upon the times, and King was actually moving over some of his objections and doing what he did because if he didn't do it, it was not going to get done. And we need to say that. Okay, let me move to one other thing before we get off the air today, because I can see the other person have come in already, and they're getting ready to come right behind this program and do what they always do here, and that is bring the best program that we have as a follow-up here at allpointstv.com. That's where we are, and that's where it's at. So let me do one other thing before we get out of here, and I got to look at my notes here, because, oh yeah, here it is right here. I wanted to bring up to those that are carrying around these signs saying Black Lives Matter, I wanted to bring in some of the writings of Margaret Sanger. Somebody put on Facebook last week some of Margaret Sanger's comments. And I want to read some of those comments to you because we know Black Lives Matter, so I want to read some of her comments. Because we're not talking about some of the lies, we're just talking about some of the ones that are out here and run by the media. Margaret Sanger, on December the 19th, 1939, in a letter to Dr. Clarence Gamble, stated, "We should hire 3 or 4 colored ministers, preferably with social service backgrounds and with engaging personalities. The most successful educational approach to the Negro is through a religious appeal. We don't want the word to go out that we want to exterminate the Negro population, and the minister is a man who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any of their more rebellious members." And she's talking about here extermination. Another part of what she wrote was, let me just go with the best ones because we're running out of time here, so let me go get the best ones. Another one was that she said in 1921, she's at this a long time, "Today's eugenics is suggested by the most diverse minds as most adequate and thorough avenue to the solution of racial, political, and social problems. I think you must agree that the campaign for birth control is not merely of eugenic value, but is practically identified with the final aims of eugenics. Birth control propaganda is thus the entering wedge for the eugenic educator. As an advocate of birth control, I wish to point out that the imbalance between the birth rate of the unfit is in quotation marks, and the fit, that's also in quotation marks, admittedly the greatest present menace to civilization, can never be rectified by the inauguration of a cradle competition between these two classes, the fit and unfit. In this matter, the example of the inferior classes, the fertility of the feeble-minded, that means the blacks, the mentally defective, the poverty-stricken classes should not be held up for immolation. Quote, on the contrary, the most urgent problem today is how to limit and discourage the overfertility of the mentally and physically defective." And that's Margaret Sanger in 1921 in a piece she did called "The Eugenic Value of Birth Control Propaganda," which is fully endorsed by the Democratic Party. She goes on in another piece, because this was ongoing and never ending. She says in another piece, "If passing, we should here recognize the difficulties presented by the idea of fit and unfit. Who is to decide this question? The grosser, the more obvious, the undeniable feeble-minded should indeed not only be discouraged, but prevented from propagating their kind. But among the writings of the representative eugenics, one cannot ignore the distinct middle-class bias that prevails." And she goes on and on and on and on. You have to decide yourself which group is propagating this. And when you carry those signs around next time, think about which of the groups is actually advocating Margaret Sanger. Then you'll be fine. Okay, got to get out of here as always. Running out of time. Don't want to be in the chairs when the next group comes in the studio, coming in about 20 minutes. That'll be Zatora's Black History Corner, always bringing a good program every 2 weeks. And that's here at the same studio. And we'll be in the seat where I'm sitting right now. Until next time, I want you to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.